So it seems like the Los Angeles Clippers are going to run it back with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. I'm already gave you a podcast talking about why I think they need to trade Paul George, but since for this podcast we're just going to focus on them potentially running it back, which that seems like they're going to do because we heard all these type of rumors that Paul George may be moved to the point guard position. A lot of people are coming out and saying that Paul George can't play point guard for the Los Angeles Clippers. His position is basketball. Paul George can handle the ball. Paul George can bring the ball to the basketball court, and he can play point guard position if the Clippers want him to, especially in Tyronn Lue's hoop system. Basically, the guys are going to pay high minutes and are going to be able to just go out and hoop and play basketball. Now, I don't think that's the right choice of what you want to do, because when it comes to the half-court game, especially when games really matter in the playoffs, when you're playing a key opponent and you got to operate in the half-court, Paul George is not really going to set up anybody or initiate your offense to find open looks for others. He's more focused on handling the ball, creating off the dribble, isolation. So asking him to be a point guard that's going to be able to pass and facilitate is not really going to be his thing, but he can do it. Just depending on certain matchups in different games in the playoffs, it's not going to be perfectly suited for his strengths. Now, what I believe that the Los Angeles Clippers need to do is go out and trade for a point guard, a kind of like a true point guard. When I say true point guard, a point guard that can really initiate the offense, run the offense through Paul George and Kawhi Leonard and get open looks for those two players. And those type of point guards are hard to find. I mean, they let Rajon Rondo go to the Atlanta Hawks. Ricky Rubio went back to Minnesota. Those would have been two perfect point guards for the Los Angeles Clippers. So you start looking at the point guard market. It's like, who can they possibly trade? It's not really a true point guard on the free agency market anymore. So who can they go out and get? So you look at the trade market and possibly players they can trade for, possibly Malcolm Brogdon, maybe for the Indiana Pacers, but it's going to be hard for probably the Indiana Pacers to want to really do a deal with them. Williams is going to have to be your biggest trade asset, and probably Terrence Mann. One of those two, a combination of those two players are 2019 draft pick that they had, and Lou Williams. We know what Lou Williams is about, coming off the bench, scoring an automatic bucket. So you're probably going to have to package those two and maybe a second-round pick or maybe a potential first-round pick later on in the future. We know all their first-round draft picks went to Paul George, so maybe like a 2025 or something, maybe if they have that for a first-round pick, or probably a couple second-round picks. So Malcolm Brogdon would be an excellent point guard for Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, or you probably try to go after maybe Spencer Dinwiddie for the Brooklyn Nets, who can also score the basketball, can play a little defense, and also can facilitate for others. He would be a perfect fit. But the perfect player for the Los Angeles Clippers, to me, they should be targeting is Lonzo Ball. The reason why Lonzo Ball is the perfect fit, because he's really a true point guard. He's all about creating for others. He's going to run the ball in a fast break transition. He can run your offense in the half court. He's a big guard that can hit open threes and that can also defend the best player on the opposing team's team. And he's one of the most lethal perimeter defenders in the NBA that nobody really talks about. He's that good, and he's still very young. He's 23 years old, still has a lot of room to grow and room for improvement, but some of his flaws won't necessarily get shown playing with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. So it's the Clippers. You really got two different choices. You got either you're going to let Paul George run the point and just live and die with Paul George being your point guard for this upcoming season, your true point guard, and let him handle the ball and create and, get buckets, because they're going to be, like I said, in the Tyronn Lue system, where it's all about high minutes, all about putting that ball in the hoop, all about going out and dominating and scoring on the offensive side of the ball. So if that's going to work for the Los Angeles Clippers, they feel like that's going to be their best option, and Paul George can definitely be the point guard for the Los Angeles Clippers. I just feel that when it comes to a half-court game and the playoffs and stuff like that, that's when it's going to probably bite them in the butt if they decide to go that route. Or you can try to go out and trade probably one of those three players I mentioned, Malcolm Brogdon, Spencer Dinwiddie, but the best player they should try to go out and get is Lonzo Ball if they can. I don't know if they're going to have the right asset, I don't know if they're going to have the right amount of assets to get Lonzo Ball, but his stock is kind of low right now. And it's also been rumors about how he, doesn't have a work ethic, or he doesn't really want to play with the New Orleans Pelicans. I don't know if that's true or not. I know Lonzo Ball, it seems like Lonzo Ball is a hard worker to me. It seems like he just wants to be in an environment where he's going to get minutes and he's going to be able to be his best self. And that just wasn't with the Los Angeles Lakers, and that hasn't been with the New Orleans Pelicans. Also, he's battled with a lot of injuries and stuff as well. So it's really up to the Los Angeles Clippers. My thing to do, if I made a podcast, I would trade Paul George, because you don't want to go into the upcoming season in a hit or miss type of season, and then if they lose or don't at least reach the Western Conference Finals, then you take a chance on losing possibly Paul George or Kawhi Leonard for free if they both opt out of their contracts. They're probably going to lose one, maybe not Kawhi, but most likely Paul George will probably be gone. And then you just you traded all your assets, all your draft picks for Paul George, and he just walked away in free agency. So that's my thing about the whole situation. It's a very tricky situation with the Los Angeles Clippers on what they should do. But it seems like they're going to run it back with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe before the season starts, there's a big trade with Paul George and some other team. But right now, it seems like they're going to run it back. And it looks like they're going to allow Paul George to be their point guard. But to me, I don't think that's the best fit for Paul George and the best move for the Los Angeles Clippers. I think they really need to go out and find a true point guard like Malcolm Brogdon and Spencer Dinwiddie, or the best option would be Lonzo Ball.